and welcome everybody. My name is Henriette. I'm one of the organizers of Feminist Futures Helsinki hackathon. And this is the first talk in our public program. We've got another talk tomorrow that's titled Making Space, Taking Space. And that's going to be with Shubhangi Singh and Brenda Vertis. So in case you're interested, I'm sure wherever you've found this event, you'll also be able to find that one either through our website or Facebook or whatever. So today we've got Synes Elischka. Synes is a filmmaker and researcher and has co-founded Querq, which is an association here in Helsinki, and also the Virtual Cinema Lab research group at Aalto Arts. They're a PhD candidate at Aalto Arts in the Department of Film, and they did their MA in Transmedia Arts at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna and at the film department of a university in Buenos Aires. So I'll leave the stage to you now. Take it away.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We're going to start with a little check-in. So this is the practice we do at Querq, Nurja. I'm using these names interchangeably. We're changing our community name to Nurja now since a year or so. So it's going to stick soon, hopefully. But this is a practice that kind of helps everyone who wants to get in touch with each other and kind of share basically how you're doing today. It's a simple way to acknowledge my emotions and my current life situation before joining any gathering. So it's easier to connect with others and kind of feel comfortable and safe. So here's how it's going to work. Henriette is going to put you in like small breakout rooms with like 3 or 5 people each, and everyone gets to talk about themselves. So one person starts, and then the person who just shared can assign another person who's going after them. When it's your turn, basically all you got to do is say your name and your preferred pronouns. If you use he, she, or they, or something else. And then you can share whatever you want. So if you don't want to share, you can just say pass. That's fine. So the only thing you need to remember is not to share anything that anyone shares in this kind of thing, to keep it kind of confidential and not have some gossip chamber going on, but just talk about yourself. I feel this, I feel that, I saw this, I saw that. Okay, you're ready for that? Video artist and filmmaker, and for a very long time I've been interested in the potential of organizing my projects in a way that allows other people to participate in an equal manner. So kind of soften the strong hierarchy that is common in cinema a little bit. And in the last 5 years, I've gotten some training in decentralization. So first, I started this decentralized research group for folks that are interested with working with new media at Aalto Arts and also beyond, outside of that, and then trying out these decentralized systems in other long-term projects. And then I attended this social tools symposium in Helsinki that was organized by Pixel. And there was a lecture by Nati Lombardo and Rich Bartlett about their 12 patterns of decentralized organizing. So that helped me a lot. That was a really invaluable resource for me. I can send you links about this stuff later. You can get in touch with me if you have anything that you want to know more about. But basically, part of this Pixel 8 group was then a year-long thing where we met every 2 months or so, and we talked about each of these patterns directly and kind of tried to find ways to implement them in our organizations and learn from each other. And so 2 years ago, I was part of a group of 8 or 20 people that started this Querq Nurja association together. And I've learned so much from this project so far. So I'll share some of that, what I learned with you today. This is the space where we've been working with for the last 2 years. It's a very large loft space with smaller workrooms. And the thing why we started this is because we needed a space that has its own safer spaces policy that applies to anything happening there. And so we have some artists and other people that are places there, and then we have a large common space that you can see in the pictures for our members, and others can use to hold events. And much of our values and our mission is related to our safer spaces policy. And as a result, the space really evolves as the members evolve and change, and as we learn together. So this is a nice space, but more important than the space are the wonderful creatures that are part of it. We're a very big group of people. Right now, we're about 20 active members and about 40 volunteers that co-create this community together, and we always need more people. So if you're interested in Instagram, I'll link it like then later, but I just wanted to start quickly. Do you hear me? Like, is everything okay? Or yeah. So I just wanted to say that what I'm presenting today is my current understanding of things. So I'm still learning, and there are many holes in my knowledge. This is a huge topic, and my aim is to give like an overview of what I know. So if you have any corrections or something to go deeper in or anything, I'm really happy if you want to share it immediately or after the session. You can use my email or other contact, or you can also ask the organizers to forward your feedback if you want to stay anonymous to me. Yeah, so I don't have access to the absolute truth, and I'm very happy to share all the references. So please ask me after the session if you need anything. I'm really excited to stay in touch and learn from each other and from other people's journeys. So that's very welcome. I don't speak for decentralization in general. This is just my approach that's based on my current understanding, which is changing all the time. But my intention is to share this understanding so that you can build on top of that and use it in your own way. And when I talk about Querq Nurja, then I'm sharing my personal experience. So we have many active members in these 2 years of our existence, and it's a collective of humans that is growing and changing. And I do not speak for everyone there. Different people there have different views on things and different experiences, and that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. So you feel free to join or leave this lecture at any point. All exercises and discussions are voluntary. Please step back if you need a break, and please ask for a break. I will have one break in between, but if you need an extra break and you don't want to miss out on what's happening, just ask for it and we'll do a small break together. Yeah, this is the 3rd time I'm giving this kind of training, and I'll keep changing it all the time. So any feedback you have for me, I really appreciate it. So anything you enjoyed or that you didn't enjoy so much, everything in between, please send me your feedback and I'll make it better than next time. Thanks. Yep, so it's 2 parts. First is basically just me talking about my experience with decentralization in Querq and how I got started with this designing systems. And the second part will have half an hour for you to ask any questions or share your own experiences or ideas about this. Yeah, so if you have any quick technical questions or so on, you can always raise your hand and ask Henriette to interrupt me or interrupt me yourself. So, for example, you don't understand a word or anything that keeps you from enjoying the lecture, please bring it up immediately. If you have deeper questions or you want a discussion to go in a different direction, please write it down and we'll have time for that in the end. So please write it down so we also have something to talk about then if something comes up during the lecture. Cool. So let's start with this question. Any of you can just unmute your microphone if you want to start talking and tell me what you understand decentralization to be.
Well, I'm not quite sure if I'm talking from the right context, but so kind of organizing is like no central authority, but it's still kind of same organization and they still work together.
Thank you.
Like for me, my understanding is how you distribute power, so it's not concentrated in just one entity, and this entity can be a person or an institution or a system. So, but you give like different agents that are part of the system, like yeah, equal power and in the decision making and actorhood.
Thank you. And here's from Meow Meow. Well, I would go with decentralization. So something that has or is central is being taken away its centrality. Great. Thank you so much for your contributions. I'm just going to go through a couple of very common misconceptions about decentralization. So often folks kind of understand that decentralization means there is no hierarchy. Hierarchy in itself is not inherently bad. The problem is coercive power. So kind of like using a power that is like, do this or else, or to kind of use power that is hidden, so that people have more knowledge, but they don't acknowledge that they have this power and don't make any effort on sharing it. So that's kind of thing. But the hierarchy can be useful. For example, if you have to make a movie or you're working at a hospital, you have to make quick decisions. It doesn't always work to have a discussion and work consent based. So it's good to have some kind of structure in place. The second thing is very common question I get is like, how can anything work without a leader? Decentralization basically means that we're all leaders if we choose to be. Therefore, as a result, like leadership or management, it doesn't have to be a bottleneck anymore. So it doesn't go like through one person, but it can like spread out more easily. And the third thing is this comparing different systems. So there is like one system is better than the other system, and like where is decentralization in that hierarchy? So decentralization, in my understanding, is a system that's based on change. So it's constantly changing. And there is no perfect thing, but it's kind of like what it is in the moment. And it's the best thing for this particular situation, these particular people. But it keeps updating, keeps changing, keeps evolving, keeps getting better. A way that helps me to kind of understand this on a more intuitive way is that looking at decentralization, how it works as in the intersection between individuals, myself, and communities, like how we organize together with other individuals. And I'm very excited and curious to observe these interactions. So I'm going to share one way that's been very intuitive for me to getting an access to the bigger picture. And this is like looking at needs that we have, like human needs, and how they're expressed in myself and how they're expressed in the communities that I'm a part of, and how these two things kind of interact with each other. Okay. So when I'm talking about needs, what I mean is these things, universal needs like safety, care, nurturing, water, things like that, cooperation. So that's a list of universal human needs. And this is a list of different ways of describing different types of organizations. There's often this idea of a hierarchy comes up again, so that one is kind of, you start with one, it's basically kind of trying to figure out the questions of safety and survival. And then as you go on through this linear idea, you kind of get different negotiations of how the power is distributed. And when we come to green, it's about the kind of like consensus-based decision-making, group communication, and so on. And so this is all tier 1, level 1 organization structures. When we come to tier 2, so that's kind of like the interesting change for me. This is like, and yellow or systematic flow, it means that you use all of the different organization styles from the first tier and you put them together as it's the best way right now, you know. And then when we go further of that, we kind of start putting these different blobs together, and instead of like organizing one way and then replacing it with some other way that is better, we kind of figure out which tool is best for each situation. And we choose tools that are good enough for now and safe enough to try. So this is a saying from Sociocracy 3.0, which is a decentralized system that's been inspiring a lot what's been happening in this space. And this kind of thinking, it works both ways. How we as individuals influence how we organize in our communities and our workplace, and the other way around. So for me, what helps me is to kind of like understand my position more clearly inside an organization, reflecting on my own power and noticing where am I holding it and where am I letting it go. So decentralization for me is about change, and including change actively into our systems and vision. And so through this kind of like updating and changing, we produce the structure that suits the people and the context that we got. And each system that we create is unique. And it really depends on the needs of the people in it and the context. And my own life is impacted by the organization that I'm in, and my own life and my own view on life kind of impacts the organization, or that we co-create in a way. Yeah, so for me, decentralization is a practice that stands in alliance with many other approaches. So resisting coercive power is important, exposing it, subverting it, defunding it. So kind of like all of these things are essential. For me, this aspect is about building alternatives of organizing where the use of coercive power, so like do this or else, or kind of using punishment or reward in order to like get people to do what you want them to, that this kind of power use becomes unnecessary. So yeah, that's kind of like quite a short intro on what it is for me. And I just looked back at when I started at Querq, we all kind of like filled in this little kind of profiles, like what we want to do in the organization and what we're interested in and what we're bringing kind of like to it. And when I started with Querq, I kind of made a conscious decision to stay in the background. So what I wrote then was, I already have a leading role into other collectives, and I would love to learn to follow a bit more, support and avoid falling into taking a bit too big role of responsibility, which is the source of stress for me, trying to reduce the amount of stress in my life at the moment. This doesn't mean that I will work less, just that I would wish my areas are more in the region of service to the collective and support as also emotional labor and care labor. So from that perspective, I have a couple of things that I learned through these 2 years, and I wanted to share with you. The first one, it's quite a big one. It's about unlearning old patterns. So all of us have, to varying degrees, been socialized in a system of violence. And it can take a really long time to unlearn these old patterns, because for me and for most of us, they come from childhood, from parents, from school, and so on. So as kids, we've been socialized not to question authority, our parents, teachers, and so on. Words like, shame on you, look what you did, stop that, put that down, no, 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 I can't believe you sometimes, didn't you learn your lesson? You know you can do better than that. So we're socialized to do as we're told. There's this idea of right and wrong behavior. And so at least me, I'm kind of like actively always like unconsciously looking at kind of like trying to please people, trying like to do stuff like that. So, and as this pattern continued in school and work life, there created this pattern of a centralization of risk and return. So kind of like people who take the risk, who put themselves out there, get the return. And it's a very kind of like tricky thing, because it discourages accountability. So it makes you take risks less often, because the kind of, if something breaks down, you are put in a dangerous situation. So and we're punishing each other in like small ways or bigger ways for making mistakes very often. But how are we going to learn if we don't make mistakes? So what I realized is that these things, these habits, take time. So I really need to kind of like slow down and really take time to watch those habits and see how they change, and practice non-judgment for different ways of being and different ways of doing things. So and allow for like transition periods and so on. For me, for example, it took many years to unlearn a complacency to these things. So still today, whenever there's something in a system that doesn't work, I'm like thinking of like a million ways how to like change myself in order to fit into some kind of like weird situation, instead of like thinking like, okay, oh, we can like change this, but how can we make this better? Like suggest changes or stuff like that. So and for me, like the good metaphor is to kind of like think about it like a garden, you know, like that I can't force the flowers to open faster by pulling them, you know, like I have to figure out like what works and what doesn't work. Like just because I'm totally in love with this particular way of doing things, that might not work for everybody else in this association. So yeah, but the thing was that I got a sixth sense over time on any system's purpose. So I'm kind of like getting much more aware like how these things actually work and how they interconnect with each other. So kind of like the more I'm kind of like familiarizing myself with systems and kind of like seeing like, okay, if we do it this way, then that's gonna happen. And that's kind of like maybe like bad in this situation, but like, okay, so we change this little thing and then this gets better. So I kind of like see more how I notice that I recognize more often like, oh, this is like very evil way of doing things. things, like when there are racist policies in place and so on. Like I got much more sensitive towards these things, and for me also, like the understanding that this practicing these things in the small scale allows us to transition these things and also to a larger scale. So this is kind of like why I'm really actively kind of like learning this for myself, because I'm curious, like how can we improve other systems as well. Okay, so that was the first thing. It's just like take time, take it easy. It's like gardening. The next thing I realized there was a big insight. So it's the example of participation. So I used to be in this kind of sense, feeling of anxiety constantly about being heard, so that I had a need of like, I need to scream if I have a problem with anything, like otherwise I will just not be heard. You know, I have to be like, take space and be loud and so on. And this fear, or that I have to have the perfect argument for something to bring kind of my experience or my view or anything inside. And so what changed for me is that I realized, okay, we can build a system where each perspective is valuable and needed. It's like different cells in the body, you know, like they have a different perspective. So you might see something different from your perspective than I might see it. So it's really kind of like making space for expressing these points of views that benefits us all. The other thing is about commitment versus autonomy. So what I learned is that is really helpful for me is that I can change my roles and my groups very freely and easily in an unbureaucratic way. So if for example, I can be in several groups. So we have different work groups that are specializing on different topics, and I can just be in working with events and content for 1 month, and then go into finances for another month, and it's totally fine. There's no issue with that at all. And so yeah, just someday I didn't feel like being in finances anymore, so I just quit. And it's like, it can be like after a single meeting, or maybe after 4 months, when I'm just noticing I'm not enjoying myself anymore. So there's no need to explain, no need to beg for forgiveness or anything like that. It's kind of part of the system, you know, that it's possible to just do that. Another thing that really something that I learned when I was in Brazil in Querq. I was at a self-organized gathering of about 100 folks, and what they told me in the very beginning was like that I should only do things that I'm excited about. So I shouldn't force myself to make breakfast for everyone just because I'm scared that nobody will do it, you know. So if I need to heal in this moment, if I need to rest in this moment, then that is a valid participation. So healing is participating, and everyone participates in different ways. So allowing for these different ways of doing and being. And I like checklists. I love automation. And I also have a hard time reading long paragraphs of text. So these are my personal things that I like and things that I have a hard time dealing with. And we all have those different ways. So it's kind of like, how can we make these things accessible? And that's one important aspect for me, is kind of like that I had to learn the hard way, because I'm just kind of like taking more and more responsibility, and in the end I'm just kind of like, I'm all alone carrying this huge responsibility and burden. And yeah, just noticing that actually I need to drop things for others to be able to pick them up. Like sometimes I'm just like hoarding responsibilities because I'm so scared of like nobody will take it. And then I realized, no, actually I had to drop it first and just be like, okay, I'm done with this. So kind of learning this more free approach towards stuff. So the last thing from this session is about transparency. So this is something connected with accessibility and what are the priorities that we set up when we build systems, what are we prioritizing, and what kind of barriers do we put up? So what would it, asking ourselves, like, what would it take for us to like remove those barriers? You know, like, what would it give to us if we remove those barriers? So for example, we started having a handbook where we write all our groups and like what they do and kind of find ways to explain things for new members that it's like written down in a kind of easy, accessible way. And it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of work to keep this updated also like constantly, and it needs to be part of the system, but it's kind of the only way to have really make it easy for new people to join and to understand the system, because otherwise we'll just become a crusty cult, you know, like, because as with anything, you know, like the more longer you work on it, you get special words and then you invent certain insider jokes, and in the end, like outside people will just not understand anything you're talking about anymore. So this is like what happens. So it's kind of a good practice to kind of let other people like join and be present. And now we had also resources to have folks, to welcome folks personally, so that we can that we can like meet them when they apply, and we can like have a one-on-one just to kind of like, hi, welcome, this is how this works. So you don't only have it in reading, but you also have a like person that talks to you to be like kind of like more welcoming in a nice way. Okay, let's have a 5-minute break. Hello. Okay, so just to kind of summarize what I've been kind of expanding a little bit about my own experience is that, well, I already said that change is kind of very central, to be like available for change and to have it like to constantly update and feedback and tries different things and so on. So that's that the structure kind of evolves to fit our needs. So yeah, instead of the human trying to adapt to the needs of the system, we're kind of having system adapt to our needs, like change to our needs. Then the second thing is about autonomy. So that gives us autonomy, gives us the possibility to act independently without turning us into a cult or isolating us from the rest of our culture. So if one day, yeah, then we have the ability to scale up or down. So depending on how many members we have in Querq, we kind of make it like smaller, certain groups close or end, or we start making new groups or changing the system according to like how many people are part of it. So if we one day want to have a global Querq network, then this is also like possible with the updating system. We remove bottlenecks. So like instead of having like a manager or like some person in the center that is like kind of has a lot of responsibility for like care labor and other things. We're kind of sharing this, so we're becoming more agile with that, more able to move around and change according to certain situations, and giving members the ability to contribute according to each of our interests and ability in each moment. And that also like brings our values to life, our shared purpose, that this is like everything we do and how we organize is connected and aligned with our core principles and our values. Good, so this is more a little bit about how to do it in practice. How do we start decentralization? So if you have an existing group or whatever of people, it's good to just start by writing down the existing structures and hierarchies, like who has power, what are the relationships between people, and so on. And then we keep changing and adopting these ways of doing things to fit our needs. So that's again, like we have to keep in mind, like kind of that there's a difference between the individual and the collective. So we need to figure out how to keeping in mind that I am individually contributing to the good of the whole association, and to the well-being of everybody else involved as well. Then we can take a look at different scales also, like so how you can look at it from an overall perspective, or you can look at it from the experience of a specific person. You can also, and the aim is to make the system visible by writing it down, like to be able to kind of really and I like to look at it as if I take a more top level approach, like kind of looking at the whole system, then I can kind of find, for example, that the idea of like energy expressing itself kind of has been quite useful for me to kind of see, like, okay, so if there's something happens that is like unpleasant, I can look at it kind of like as an energy that is expressing itself in a way that is kind of causing some tension. So like the question is then not about kind of like necessarily like pushing back against that energy, but seeing like how this expression can be like redirected in a way that that becomes out in the open, you know, like, so instead of having like some bullying or some high school dynamics where people like talk behind closed doors or like kind of have some gossiping going on, like that's okay if that happens, you know, like, but it's good to kind of like see it, acknowledge it, talk about it, and then kind of find a way, like how can we redirect it, like really neutrally. And so that's a lot of kind of trial and error. But the important thing for that to work is kind of like incentivizing feedback and to have a culture of feedback to make it really like a positive thing to give feedback. And that's a really tricky one, and we're still figuring that out because it's very alien to, I guess, most people in our culture. But the kind of interesting thing for me is to kind of see, and that when I just this flexibility, I can follow like what feels good at any time, and the time work only like on an individual level, so I can choose each group, but also like on a group level, for example. Do you hear me okay? Good.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking general. If you can hear me, because it just kicked me out, but I'm back now. Yeah, so we have this small groups that have the autonomy to, like, when you're in the group, you can make decisions about whatever the group is about. So like if we're in cleaning organization, where I was for a while, then we can just make something up that's like then applies to everyone, because people can choose freely to join each group or leave each group according to their interests, you know. But like, you cannot like scream from the sidelines, kind of like, this is crap, whatever this group does is wrong, and I disagree with it, and I want you to do something else. No, that doesn't work. You can join the group and then participate in the decision-making process directly. So that's also like something that kind of like helps to get out of this lack mindset in a way. Yeah, and each of these groups has a mandate, so they can make decisions on themselves, but also individuals can have mandates. So that basically means that they can ask for advice, but basically they can make the decision by themselves without input from anybody else. So the power gets distributed first in the work groups, and then the work group distributed to individuals or make decisions in a consensus way inside the work group. So that's been a quite useful way to distribute the power for us, at least. So, but basically it's a small group of people making a decision, decide together what's good right now for everybody else in the collective. But for that to work, we need trust, we need transparency, we need a shared purpose. So we need to know and understand what are the existing decisions and agreements. We need psychological safety, we need reliable conflict situation, and we need regular reflection. So those are kind of like the essential things that we need to have. And so we need a lot of trust, and it takes time and effort to build trust. So this is kind of like goes back to the first thing I said about time and just taking time. And this is like building this trust is also part of a healing process, both individually and collectively. So this is one thing that helped me a lot when I found it. This is Brené Brown's research about the 7 elements of trust. So if you haven't heard of this, I would recommend you to take a look into it. So this just helped me a lot to kind of, when I'm ever have individual trust issue or some trust issue with some group or whatever, and I can go through these 7 elements and then not be like, kind of like, I don't trust you, but I don't know what it means and I don't know how to fix it. Like, but I can actually look at like, okay, is it the boundaries? Somebody violated my boundaries. Did I violate my own boundaries? What's going on there? Or is it reliability? Like, are people in my surrounding not actually doing what they say they're doing? So I don't trust them because of that, you know, like, so that's a common thing for me. Accountability, like own your mistakes, apologize and make amends, listen before explaining your own side or defending yourself. So not sharing information that's not meant for other people, like keeping secrets and stuff. Choosing courage over comfort. I can ask for what I need without fearing being judged. Offering the most generous interpretation of other people's intentions, for example, or their words or actions and so on. You can Google this thing. It's been very useful for me. I have it like printed out next to my desk or something. And another thing that's been very useful and that we're also like still learning a lot is decentralizing care labor. So that's something that often falls between the cracks. That's just some person somewhere is going to take care of everyone. And it's just kind of what happened, what has been happening. So it was my wish from the very beginning to have a dedicated working group that's only job is to deal with conflict resolution and distributing care labor, updating our safer space policy, and make sure that folks don't burn out too easily. That's called Mega Care Bears right now. And basically one of the tools that we came up with, or we didn't come up with, but somebody else did, and we kind of tried it for us, is that we have this stewarding circle. So each person has a buddy, and this is kind of like goes in a circle. So we just randomly make a circle with all the members, and then if this is me, and then this is the next person, so I'm responsible for that person, and that person is responsible for that person, and so on. And then I have somebody that takes care of me, and I'm taking care of somebody else. So we kind of check in every now and again. And it's something that me and others keep forgetting, that we have this possibility and we can use it for whatever. So it's just like kind of nice to be able, because I've been getting so much of this, to be able to talk with somebody inside the organization, and I could just like let out, like the check-in, you know, you just talk about what's going on and how I'm feeling and so on. It just feels kind of like, helps to kind of like, yeah, balance things for me. So yeah, this check-in, check-out practice, very, very helpful. We kind of saw it in this thing as well. Hopefully then, yeah, this is a big one. The system itself, kind of, because you can like easily join and leave things, but then still there's a lot of, especially now with COVID, and we have struggling to make money to enough money to kind of pay for the rent and so on. So it easily then also like things go slow and people don't do things that you don't want to do. So some things just fall between the cracks, and then somebody gets really stressed and worried about it. So yeah, so there's a lot of balancing and learning and unlearning to happen. But I'm just going to say some few last tips that I thought were very helpful for me. Okay, but this is we're almost done. Yes, so non-validation, I don't know if you heard about this, but this has been like very useful. Like I've got a lot of kind of like these synergistic properties like that like this decentralization and the NVC kind of like kept helping each other and making each other better. But I can talk more about this if somebody's interested later. But yeah, other thing is to kind of like being aware of the scale of the project, by which I mean is like that we are overcoming violence, patriarchy, exploitation, coloniality, like all these interdependencies that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's really good to know that we're not alone and we're in it for the long run. So like, it's been helpful for me to kind of acknowledge that I cannot fix everything myself, obviously, but also like that it just takes time, and that it's like this collective individual kind of like, yeah, back and forth that helps me to kind of get out of this stuff. Meditation has been big help to kind of like distance myself from the emotional reactions. So kind of I introduce a little bit of space, like tiny bit of space between what is happening and what another person brings towards me and what my expectation and needs in the situation are. And it helps me to step aside kind of like from this and be more present with listening, with being present and hearing what the other person. This also works well with NVC and active listening. So the practice of asking questions until I 100% understand what somebody else is saying. So when I'm proposing something, it also helps me to step aside from the proposal faster each time, the more I do it. So I can notice my attachment to it. So when I'm like, hey, this is a great idea, and then I put a lot of effort into it, and then everybody's like, meh, and I'm like, yeah, I find joy in creating new patterns and approaches and try things. And as time goes on, I start feeling safer of letting go of them, and just kind of like, I put them out there, I take what works and I discard what doesn't work, and then I try something else and I ask for feedback, and I just keep pushing. And what had really, really helped me a lot is boundaries. So first one is between me and you, kind of getting away from the codependency of like, just understanding every time I get confronted with something, some emotional, some strong situation, I ask myself, is this my need? What is my need? What is the other person's need? What is my emotion? What is the other person's emotion? So I'm able to kind of like keep asking myself like, what is this? And then recently I also started doing this with like present and future, because there's a lot of stuff happening and a lot of things that stress me out. So it's kind of helped me a lot to kind of say like, hey, what is happening right here? It's right now important. I need to focus on this, but then this thing that's stressing me out, it's actually a future thing. I can write it down on some list and forget about it. So this kind of like understanding, okay, what is me, what is you, what is now, what is future, it's kind of that helped me a lot to give a lot of safety. So thanks so much. And this is, the mic is open for you and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have a couple of questions at least, but I want to leave it open first to see if anyone else in the audience wants to ask something or give feedback or clap. You can just open your mic or you can write it in the chat. More claps. So then I'll ask a question at least. I'm wondering, you touched upon a little bit about defunding and power. And I'm wondering how you might see the potential for decentralization in defunding or kind of redistribution of wealth. I don't know if that's like, if it's kind of too big of a question, but yeah, maybe just your thoughts on that.
That's an excellent question, and it's a very deep one because of finances, money. It goes very deep in our feeling of safety and our feeling of autonomy. Also, like, are we able to? And that's something that we've been like kind of trying to negotiate for a while in Querq, and it's been kind of like how do we deal with money? Like, we make money, we spend money. Like, how do we make these decisions kind of collectively? So that's something that I have very like clear ideas about, like what I think it should be or how it would be optimal, but I don't know like how to get there, you know, like yet, especially like in this setting that we are. So there have been several situations where I went and kind of made more effort into like trying to get some system that I was thinking, and then got pushback from people in the association that it didn't feel safe or it didn't feel kind of clear enough. So yeah, but are you talking about something in specific, like some specific system?
No, I was just wondering sort of the general structure and how, like, you know, maybe also where it could be applied, sort of where you see a potential for decentralization in the future, not only sort of with the goal of redistributing wealth, but yeah, maybe also elsewhere, like where do you see that there's a potential for this system to be applied?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the kind of problems we're dealing with is that today is that we're kind of like dragging along kind of ways to do things or ways to organize that are very ancient. So there's cultures, there's things that are just like, I mean, coloniality is alive and kicking. Like, these things are still around, and people in privileged situations don't notice them because everything's just running smoothly as all. You have to come on the let's say bad side of the system, that you're kind of like judged in some way or something to really notice it, and then you notice it, and then other people start gaslighting you because they're like, on my side everything's fine, like what are you talking about? And so yeah, this is the thing with this for me, like the whole idea of extractionism and taking things out. I think like decentralization is really like that's why I wrote as a title also like that it's a practice, you know, like it's not a solution, it's a practice that helps together with individual personal practice and whatever else you do or we do to kind of get some more like okay, so like for example, if I want to have more freedom to choose what I want to do, and my in the world, you know, like, or if I'm confronted with really dangerous situations, you know, like I'm much more likely to kind of like be able to create some collective or some situation to kind of counterbalance, have some kind of knowledge about how this works in practice. And this knowledge we can only get by experiencing and trying ourselves. So this is one of the tools, organizing whatever experience you have or each one of us brings to the table. It's just like one piece of the puzzle, and like together we can learn from each other and get better at this and start kind of like actually, because that's like so much of this work for me was about kind of realizing and noticing more and more about what once I see these things, then I come up with ideas like how to make it better, and then we try it, and then it works or it doesn't work, and then we try something else, and that's kind of like this.
Yeah, so Yammer has a question in the chat. Maybe I can just read it. I was wondering also something along the lines of Henriette, but more from the perspective that have you experienced the violence or penetration of capitalism in Nurja? So how people have delimited those who can and how to participate, or if the costs of resources are expensive have interfered.
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly interfering. Thank you for the question. It's constantly interfering with anything we do, like kind of like so we are renting a workspace that costs about 3,200 euros a month. So we have to come up with that money each month, and we have a system where we rent out part of the workspaces that pay for our rent, and then rent out the event space for events. And some of the events we don't charge anything, like depending if it's political work and so on. Other events, like if it's a birthday party, we charge more. So we kind of like try to get things in that way. And also, like, of course, a lot of this work, most of the work is still voluntary work, and this was the thing what I tried to kind of get at with financing, is that of course it's not accessible if people are not paid in this system. Like it's kind of hard, or maybe in Finland it's maybe easier with unemployment and so on, but like, so the idea was like kind of like try and figure out different ways to have everybody paid, or like right now we're paying people that do certain things that nobody else wants to do or is excited to volunteer about. So that's kind of like the decision that kind of happened. So for example, or things that bring in money or allow us to keep existing. Like for example, if folks are working on showing the space to new event organizers, for example, and coordinating with them, that's paid. Cleaning is paid, and so on. But like it just it's not perfect, and yeah, I'm feeling a bit like kind of like overwhelmed with how to make it better in the moment, but because like we're really struggling financially, and this also like has a direct impact on the feeling of safety of our members and the feeling of like a future, or like what we can do. And so this is like, even if you take the bigger picture, it's still kind of like very stressful, you know, like to live in a situation like that. And yeah, but again, it's a trial and error of figuring these things out, I think.
Hi, I have a question. Well, it's not exactly a question, but I wanted you to say something more about non-violent communication, because
Sure. Hi. So NVC, nonviolent between people on and it has several tools that are part of it. For one, but it's a personal practice, so it's not about something that you can tell other people you should do better NVC, but it's more about myself to kind of like learn how to practice empathy, like by just having these certain tips and tricks, and then over time it becomes, if I use this kind of like tools over time, I noticed that I got much easier and in kind of connecting with other people and using language to express my emotions and my needs, so on. So, for example, this is like NVC. There's many different approaches and tools and subsets. Like I've been learning a lot with the ideas of Marshall Rosenberg, a psychologist from the States, who started this particular iteration of the thing. But it's about, for example, what he does is kind of like he works with puppets a lot. So you have two different languages. Giraffe language, which is about talking from the heart and what's alive in you. Basically, that's the idea of needs. It's like about kind of like life expressing itself. It's not necessarily something that can be put into language, but language is kind of used as kind of clutch in order to get something across there. And then there's Jackal, which is a language of strategies and kind of like judgments and evaluations and so on. So what you try to do is kind of like try to use your giraffe ears and you try to speak in giraffe. So like that, even if somebody uses Jackal, so even if they use a judgment, for example, you try to understand by doing active listening, what are their needs and their emotions behind what they're actually saying. So an example would be like kind of like, I'm so pissed off, you're like kind of there's some trash in the kitchen and like what the hell. Then you can like separate this thing and say like, okay, so what's actually happened, you know? So you start with an observation, basically saying like, what would a camera see if it was there filming that situation, you know, like, so I saw you the last 3 times in the week. You were leaving dishes in the sink and you never cleaned them up, but I did it then. And so that's a clear observation. Then you go to the emotion. So you're like kind of like, I'm angry and frustrated. So okay, here's your emotion. What's the need? A need for respect and sharing of the thing. So in the end, there you have actually a way, an opportunity to connect with other people, to kind of like hear what is actually going on in them, instead of kind of like going into a discussion of like what's right or what's wrong, what is an evaluation, like an expectation that I have or a strategy that I use in order to like avoid certain emotions and stuff like that. Does it make sense? Yeah.
I have another question. No, because I think in general communication in that sort of groups is most important, because like, how do you, on what do you build all of this, right? So what kind of like mediums of communication you have, especially now in COVID, you know, like do you have some, I know you have some system online, and then you have this individual individual dogs and so on. So no more channels of communication.
Channels of communication. Okay.
Yeah.
12 patterns of decentralized organizing. So they're like 6 and 6. 6 are about the structure, and 6 are about the culture of these patterns. So they went around and they interviewed about 1,000 different decentralized organizations all over the world. This was Rich and Nati. And then they kind of found these 12 things that are basically each one of these associations had problems with one of those or many of those. So they kind of like simplified it in a way, and these communication tools are kind of an important part of that. So they distinguish between real-time communication and asynchronous communication. So you have asynchronous is kind of like writing on a message board. And so what we have is we have like 4 different types of writing. So the first one is meetings, like in-person meetings. That means we try to have a lot of meetings in person. Right now we have them on Zoom. But this is kind of like good for checking in, for making decisions, for distributing tasks, for deciding the next meeting, stuff like that. Things that are just faster to do in person. Then we have online communication. So there's a lot of stuff happening. We use Slack. We have a free version of that because we're a non-profit organization. So so we use that to kind of like communicate in groups. So we have different channels there, like for each group, and then channels for all active members and channels for all members, and for different topics and so on. Like a lot of the automation, like if a new member applies, then the application, we have 7 days to kind of bring up concerns about this particular person joining. So like if it's like I have an open conflict with that person, I might want to resolve it before they join. So I kind of like hold the application, and then I just kind of like get some help in order to kind of like deal with that conflict, in order to feel safe that that person joins the workspace. So then this gets posted automatically in Slack, and then people can see it and can interact with it there. And then we have Google Docs for like kind of like more meeting notes and stuff like that, things that are like more semi-permanent. And then we have the handbook, which is kind of like the top level thing, is where we write everything that happens that stays pretty much. Like if it doesn't change for half a year, then it goes to the handbook, basically. Like yeah, and you're welcome to check out the handbook. There's a lot of resources there that might be interesting for you, and it's kind of nice to get started and learn a bit more about how we do things and how new members are introduced and so on. It's at handbook.nurja.space if you're interested. Does this answer your question? There's another question from Meow Meow. I was also interested about if you have been reflecting about the organization or system culture this kind of system creates. So if I understood right, one of the aims or goals is that the system adapts to its users, constructors, but would you also say that, that the structure of the system creates its own kind of positions, relations, that make boundaries for certain kind of culture for the participants with their participation to it? So if a feminist art event space collective would have something in common in their system culture as their neighborhood watch group, because they're organized through this kind of system. So I understand this like that the system connects with values. So for us, how I see this in practice is that we have a safer spaces policy. So a lot of these values that we have, they come from that. So for example, a value of accountability. So we want people to kind of like, if they cross somebody's boundaries, we want them to listen to the person whose boundaries were crossed. So not to kind of like defend themselves or go into this kind of like thing, but to listen, to bring this up, and we want the system to reflect that, those values. So of course, any kind of the culture and the system kind of like it's interacting all the time. And what I'm hoping is that like hook them up at some point, so that, I mean, find some way to learn from each other and apply different things. Oh, this works well, so we use this, and this tool works well, so we kind of like get more flexible in joining and adjusting and trying things. And yeah, then also like to connect between other organizations, so that there are direct links and the borders become more fuzzy, like as people join different groups and meta collectives and so on. So I've been participating in Extinction Rebellion for a while last year, and they have a local group, but in the global thing, they have a worldwide decentralized system running. And that's been really fascinating. For example, I learned a lot from them about the culture of onboarding and of training. So I took a lot of trainings, because like when people join this, they have all these offerings to like, they should go through nonviolent communication training, like 5 sessions. They should go through nonviolent direct action training. They should go through decentralization training, 5 sessions. So there's really like an effort to kind of bring people together and share those tools and resources, so that not like everyone is just like confronted and makes the same kind of like learning process, but like we actually ease the learning process for new people joining. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. We're just a few minutes over time, so I think we'll wrap it up now. But thank you all for joining, and thank you for your questions. And of course, especially thank you to Synes for super interesting talk. And I think this is a topic that, yeah, needs a lot more exploring. And it's been great to also hear how you've applied it in your work with Nurja. So yeah, if you want to say a last word or something, then I'll let you do that.
Unmute. Yeah, I just wanted to share quickly that we have this link tree. Like if you go to our Instagram page, you can find it here, and there is like all the resources you can find there in an easy way. So you can find our events, you can make an application for an event if you want to organize one. We definitely need people that rent some workspaces. We have a few available, so if you're curious in this, you want to see the space, you can just fill a form there, and it's quite straightforward. Also very welcome to join as a member. Like the best way of applying this is applying it in practice and learning it. So this is a link to the Safer Spaces policy also, so you can read up on that and see what you like. And interesting thing is our handbook also. So this is a page where we have all the stuff. So it starts with the basic introduction, and then you have this handy thing, where do I start? So we have like introductions for event organizers or new members, like get some stuff on the association that we have, then different types of memberships, why do we have them, and so on. And then how we do things. This goes more in the nitty-gritty stuff, like what are coordinators, how do they work, some help resources for them at the stewarding circle I was telling about, and conflict resolution. A lot of these are still in draft format. And then we have the work groups, so you can see, like, for example, management is the one that I'm coordinating at the moment, but I'm going to pass it on soon. So if somebody's interested in coordinating management on Querq, very welcome to take over from me. And then, yeah, so then we use Trello here to kind of show a little bit, and this is all public, so you can see, like, for example, what is our purpose of this group. So you can see like how this, what are we actually doing in management group, and what is our purpose, like what do we exist, what are we accountabilities, like what needs to be done by us, what expectations do they have, and what are our assets, and what are the roles. There's a lot of roles that I have, so the things that I do in management, and then what are our active projects and so on. So this is kind of a nice way to kind of get into things and snoop around a little bit. But yeah, I wanted to thank you all for coming and checking this out and listening to my decentralization propaganda. And yeah, and thanks so much to Henriette for hosting this talk, and for Feminist Futures Helsinki for giving me the space to talk here. Bye.